I think we're live on all platforms. So, as usual, that's my Twitter, my LinkedIn, where I'm at Will Critchlow, and the SearchPilot YouTube channel. Live streaming to all of them. So, hi everyone. My name is Will Critchlow. I'm founder and CEO at SearchPilot, and I try and do one of these every week. A live stream to talk through stuff that's been going on in the world, particularly of search, SEO testing, digital marketing more generally, technology even more generally, and things I've been reading, learning from, investigating that I think might be interesting to other folks. So normally I go live on a Tuesday at 4:15 p.m. UK time. If you'd like to join me regularly, as that's 11:15 a.m. normally East Coast time, 8:15 a.m. West Coast time. This week, time zones are weird. Also it's Friday. I do know that. So it's currently 3:15 in the afternoon in the UK, but it's still 11:15 on the East Coast and 8:15 on the West Coast. And the reason for that is that the US has moved on to daylight savings time, and the UK has not yet. It's bad enough that we change our time zones all the time, but the fact that nobody's thought to kind of coordinate these things and synchronize them is wild to me. So I think there's a couple of weeks this year where we're an hour closer together than we normally are. So it's 4 hours time difference to the East Coast, and 7 to the West Coast. And actually, this is better. So I'd love it if the UK could just stay on winter time and the US could stay on summertime. That would be great for those of us who work transatlantic. So, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk a little bit about the extreme scale of Google, based on some new research that's come from SparkToro and some other data that I've got my hands on. We're going to be talking a little bit about some other places that I've been having interesting conversations this week, and some different kinds of appearances that are coming up, and just some stuff that I found interesting. So I've got some, as quite often is the case, some chat GPT type stuff, some new features from SearchPilot, and a little bit more. But before we get into that, let's dive into the research. Firstly, if you want to get the links later, I will tweet those out from at Will Critchlow, share them on LinkedIn at Will Critchlow. And as I say, if you want this live stream, it's on both those places as well as the SearchPilot YouTube. You can also go to searchpilot.com/live, where you can request a demo of SearchPilot if you want to see more, or get resources like some of our customer success stories, how SEO testing works, and sign up to our email that gets you SEO test results in your inbox every couple of weeks. But first of all, let's talk about this research that I've been going on about. So, hang on a second. I was hoping to share my screen, and I don't know if that is going to work. It does seem to be working. Okay, great. I'm operating in a new Chrome profile, and I hadn't given it permissions. It said I was going to have to restart Chrome, but it looks as though it might be working. So let's see where we get to. Okay. Right. So, did you see this research? So, Rand, old friend of mine, who back in the day when he was running what used to be called SEO Moz, and Moz, and my old company Distilled, we used to partner very closely together. He's now founder at SparkToro, which is doing some really interesting stuff. I'm looking forward to their V2 that's coming out very soon, I think, which is going to show us things like data that we haven't really had access to before, like pick a persona and then understand what folks in that persona search for, as well as what they do on social, which is going to be pretty cool. But anyway, you might have seen this research that they published, and I think it's been updated since the first version of the post, because a lot of folks took the wrong message away from it, which was that people misinterpreted what Rand was saying, that you should only look to market on Google because of the scale and size of it, which Rand doesn't think is the truth. I certainly don't think it's the only thing that you should do. But I operate in the search space, and I wanted to just highlight some of this data just because I think that so what's the one that I think is the really big story is this kind of data. Folks in the search space might not see this as a surprise, but I suspect that it will have surprised not only lay people and bystanders, but also some other digital marketers who aren't search specialists. As I said, Rand has posted clarifications versus the initial data, and that this chart is not showing where people spend their time. Of course, people spend a lot more time on Instagram and Facebook and Amazon and the like, YouTube, of course, and they spend relatively little time actually on Google. But Google does send an incredible amount of the traffic out to the rest of the web, and this is just, I think the headline here is not only the size of Google, but the extreme dominance of search as a source of traffic. Obviously, Google being the lion's share of that, but we already knew that part. But look at this huge amount of Google in the pie. Also, Bing combined with the rest of Microsoft coming in here at perhaps a surprisingly high level, and in second place, right? Bigger than YouTube, Facebook, Reddit, Twitter. And I think you can even see things like DuckDuckGo coming in above Instagram, for example, above Amazon, above LinkedIn. And I think what that shows, and in particular what's responsible for Bing in second place, is that search is still a dominant way of how folks find websites. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. And we'll get onto the future looking part of this a little bit in a minute. But basically, this just shows how powerful search is. And this is, I think, supporting my, this was an earlier version of that same chart, so supporting a version of the argument that I've made a few times, including on this live stream, that the reason that SearchPilot is so focused on what we do in SEO is that for the folks that we work with, which are generally some of the largest sites in the world, so for very, very large websites, whether that's in e-commerce, in travel, real estate, in jobs, media, listings, even local, search is by far, organic search in particular, is by far the biggest channel, especially the biggest channel for new customer acquisition, and remains, in my opinion, the biggest opportunity. And despite all that, is the least well understood channel. And that's the bit that we're obviously trying to make a difference to at SearchPilot. But it was really useful for me to see this data coming from SparkToro and in their partnership with Datos. So the perception I've been in the industry since 2005, and it's been a running joke that SEO is dead, SEO is dying. I've not even engaged with this discussion really. I don't think at any stage over the years, but there's almost 20 years in the industry, and it's come up repeatedly. And there've been various evolutions of this kind of panic and concern. So the first I remember was in the late 2000s with the rise of social media, and remembering that it was when Facebook released their newsfeed. I'm going to guess, I feel like that was 2007, 2006, somewhere in that range. Of course, Twitter comes along in that same kind of era. They're experiencing this explosive growth. And there was a concept back then, hard to remember, put yourself back in those shoes, but there was a belief among many folks at that time that this social traffic was going to cannibalize search traffic, that actually the explosive growth was going to continue at the expense of organic search in particular. And I think this is the Steelman version of this, was that folks would start moving to asking their friends questions that previously they would have asked Google. So instead of Googling where to go out for dinner, they would ask their friends where to go out to dinner. And what actually ended up happening was more subtle than that, and I think was much more additive and incremental. So obviously people do ask on social media those kind of questions, and these days, of course, we're now starting to see people searching on social media. Right, search on TikTok is the latest meme that I've been hearing a lot about. but it was mainly incremental. It was mainly as well. Search volume continued to grow, number of searches per user continued to grow, and traffic out from Google continued to grow. And we saw that continue for obviously, that's now over 15 years since that kind of era of panic and concern. And we've seen iterations of these kinds of concerns over the years. So the other big one going around right now is about search quality. Is search quality degraded compared to the past? And I was chatting to Dan Shaw on his podcast the other day about this. I think it is a very, very hard question to judge from the outside whether that's even true, whether search quality has in fact gone downhill. And to the extent it has, is that because Google's got worse or because the internet's got worse, right? The quality of content that you might be looking for maybe has gone downhill as well. But it's not even the first time that we've heard those concerns. So when I think probably the first time I remember it was Hacker News even back then, in the same way that it is today, getting all upset about declining search quality would have been the I'm going to say 2009 era. So we were coming at the end of that time when Google had incentivized and through AdSense had actually paid for the incredible expansion of the internet itself. And they were incentivized to do that because they were really the only ones who could tame it on the other end with PageRank algorithm and so forth. Google was the leader in crawling, indexing, and ranking content across the web that was in this kind of ballooning fast growth state. But what had happened through that late 2000s was folks have been incentivized to put ever more content and database driven content and thin pages on their websites. Excuse me. And as a result, there were indexable pages on sites, even if there was no real content there. So out of stock products, regions with no, imagine real estate, for example, you might have location pages that actually have no houses for sale. And because they were just being spun out of a database, those pages existed, they were linked to, they were indexable, and for a time Google indexed them. And that was one source of low quality. The other thing that Hacker News was banging on back then was a lot of scraper sites outranking original content. I remember this happening in the SEO industry, but it was happening in every industry. The famous canonical example, I think, was Stack Overflow, Stack Exchange, being aggressively scraped and routinely lower quality websites repurposing their content but outranking the original. And that was a search quality panic that we all lived through in the late 2000s. And it led directly, I think, to the development of a number of technologies on the Google side, particularly the Panda and Penguin updates, which, broadly speaking, I think we'd have to say were extremely successful. The search quality improved, a lot of those specific problems went away, and we saw the next decade gradually, continual growth, continued happiness, actually, I think user happiness with search results. And what I would love to be able to see is some of the internal Google metrics around searcher satisfaction. From the outside, we all have those anecdotal cases where we couldn't find the result we wanted even though it existed, or we got better results by appending Reddit to our search results. And I've done this as well. And, it is very easy to get sucked into the anecdotes. But I'll draw you back to the picture we have on screen. Google is so much bigger than we can really even imagine and take in. And, the fact that we're more frequently hitting those edge cases or those low quality search results actually doesn't say anything about the average quality. And we've seen, I think, in some of the now released internal Google data, the slide decks and the documents that have come out of some of the trials, right? The antitrust trials in particular in the States. We've seen some of their internal data that they never intended to make public, talking about how actually, it's not universally true that search quality has declined. But I think the story of Panda and Penguin says, even if it has, that they're so hugely incentivized to solve this problem, I would not be betting against them. Where am I going with all this? I'm saying I think we've seen, history has shown the ability to deal with low quality content in the search results, and the ability to deal with other high growth web usage and even sources of traffic in the form of social. And so I'm not betting that this is going anywhere anytime soon, and we'll talk a little bit more about those bets in a little bit. But anyway, this was the data that came from SparkToro. It also, I came across an old interview that I had missed. So this was a quote from the CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai, talking on the Hard Fork podcast, and I think this was from last summer sometime. And he said that year over year they were sending more and more traffic outside of Google. And my reading in this certainly could conflate organic and paid search, but I don't think this is. I think send outside means off Google, doesn't just mean off Google search. So I would read this as not including traffic to sites other than YouTube and Google Maps and the like. And so even though we've seen a rise of zero-click searches, and even though we've seen a rise in search features, year over year, traffic out from Google has continued to grow. And this brings me back to this point about the scale and the opportunity. But before we get all self-congratulatory and happy about this, if you work in SEO, I think we need to remember that perception is at least as important as reality. And one of the perennial challenges with SEO investment is the perceived lack of measurability, which we'll come back to, and the perception that when compared to other digital channels, search is maybe passe. I don't know if that's exactly the right way of framing it, but there is something about the new and the shiny that attracts not just geeks like me, but also executives, marketing leaders, and marketing teams. And this idea that is search on the decline, or if not on the decline, maybe potentially about to be on the decline. Well, perception is reality. If that doesn't have to be true to cause a major problem for those of us who work in the space where we rely on companies making those smart investments. And if they're going to make what I would consider the wrong investment, to pull back because they imagine that either search quality is a problem, or the rise of the large language models and potential search generative experience and these kinds of things could, limit the future growth, even cause the decline of organic search traffic. Well, I think the challenge is the perception is strong. And what I think we need to be doing is countering some of that argument. I heard an argument the other day, or a sentiment the other day, that has been really bouncing around in my head since I heard it, which was, someone said, what matters more than whether AI can do your job is whether your boss thinks AI can do your job. And that's really, really been sticking with me, because it's so true. If you think about it, it doesn't actually need to be true that the AI is great, better than you, even capable. If there's a perception that it is, then investments can be cut, people can be redeployed, jobs can be lost. And I think the same is potentially true for us. And I've definitely understood that there's some challenges in the SEO agency and consulting market at the moment. And thankfully, I think the fact for us at SearchPilot, there is still we still got a tailwind of folks wanting SEO to be more and more measurable and accountable. But for organic search work generally, I think what matters more than whether organic search is the biggest channel and the biggest opportunity, like I've been saying, for large websites at least, the question is, does leadership think it's smaller than that, or think it might be declining? And so on this front, Rand and SparkToro's data helps. So thank you, Rand and SparkToro. And I wanted to touch on the other side of it a little bit. So I don't know if folks have seen some of Eli's predictions. I'm a big fan of Eli's work. I've got product-led SEO on the bookshelf behind me, actually. But he is taking this view, that a bit bigger. He's taking this view that 60% of organic search traffic could be going away in Q2 is kind of how I'm reading this. And I say I've got a lot of time for Eli, but I don't think this is likely. I don't think this is what we are going to see. I talked about this a little bit on, I mentioned I appeared on Dan Shaw's podcast. We only spoke this week, but he's been very quick in getting that episode up, and you can find that on his Twitter feed, and I retweeted it as well. And we had an in-depth conversation about this. So I'm optimistic. I'm the bull case for Google and for search generally, and I just don't see it. I don't see a world where Google is about to cut off 60% of organic search traffic. I would happily take the other side of that bet for anyone who wants to place it, including Eli, if he's listening. Not only do I not think that's happening in the next quarter, I don't think that's happening in the next 3 to 5 years. Who knows longer than that? I can't predict. 12 months out, never mind. 3 or 5 years out. But yeah, I've got a few reasons for thinking this. I think that there are monetization challenges for Google. I think they haven't cracked where ads go in the mix. I think there's user preferences, both. Is a chat interface the right interface? Is a single answer what you want? Is actually reading websites or visiting websites what you want? I think the clicks out are going to continue and going to be important. And it certainly seems pretty baked into Google's ethos and culture that they want to send large amounts of traffic out to the rest of the web. And there would certainly be a major problem. I mean, if Eli is right, then not only is it a major problem for marketers, but it's going to become a major problem back for Google as well, because they rely on the web and content creators to produce the material that they ingest that becomes, whether it's search results or whether it's generative experiences, they need that content to be produced. So what if I'm wrong? What if this is going to happen quicker than I think it is, and to a greater degree than I think it is? Not as close as, not as far as Eli, not 60% in a quarter or two, but what if we are going to see a 5 or 10% drop over 3 years or something? Well, I think I would refer back to these charts and say, don't stop investing. The opportunity is still immense, and I think, especially for those large websites that really rely on search traffic and that can't replace it from these other long tail of referrers. So I've been having conversations in a few places recently. I mentioned appearing on Dan's podcast. I'm actually this evening, UK time, I guess around lunchtime on the West Coast, early afternoon on the East Coast. I'm going to be on the SEO video show. So we'd love you to love to see you there, and do come on that YouTube live stream later on today. I'm going to be talking about how we show SEO value to leadership, which obviously relies on a lot of these kinds of things that we're talking about here. Other things I've been reading and listening to, I mentioned this quote came from Hardfork. That's actually, Hardfork is something that I've been enjoying more and more. This is the podcast from the New York Times. They publish a lot of the articles about the episodes as well. And this is Kevin Rose and Casey Newton. And I have, as I say, really been enjoying this podcast, and would recommend it to anybody who wants to keep up to date with the latest in tech news and so forth. I particularly enjoyed their episode. I listened yesterday to their episode with Kara Swisher, and I've listened to a lot of Kara's stuff, and she's great, but they really brought out the best in her, in my opinion. Some of the stories that she was telling were very funny, very insightful, and it definitely led me to put her book, which is called Burn Book, on my reading list. That's something that I'm looking forward to as well. I'm going to be doing a slightly different talk. This is one you have to be in London. This is going to be in person. But if you happen to be in London next month, I'm going to be doing a panel all around agency M&A. So I'm obviously on the sales side, telling some of the stories of selling distilled and I know that's of interest to some of the folks who follow along with this content. And yeah, let's see you there. You can come along to that in Shoreditch on the 16th of April. So I thought I'd finish out today with, we've talked a fair bit about ChatGPT, large language models, AI, these kinds of things. Two large language model things that I've found interesting since we last spoke. The first was that, I've been operating, I think I mentioned before, I've been trying to operate with a constantly open tab on my browser of ChatGPT as well as Google Gemini. And I'm paying for so I've got the Google Gemini Advanced and the ChatGPT 4, and just trying different things. I find them good for the generative things, generative images, first drafts of things, comparisons of documents, that kind of stuff. I have not been finding them particularly great as a replacement for search. And I just thought this one was an interesting example where ChatGPT gets this kind of just completely wrong. Misunderstands articles on the web, references them. If you click through the article that that it refers to, actually doesn't say Google stopped using meta keywords. It says Google doesn't use meta keywords, and yet the fact that it was published in September 2009 was just them responding to some rumors. It wasn't about a change at Google particularly. So yeah, that was one interesting thing. I've also been struggling. I feel like some kind of dystopian future where we have to run some kind of management training for our large language models. I really struggled to get Gemini to actually do a task. So it kept telling me that it was going to do the work and report back to me as soon as possible, which is not functionality it has. So this was it kind of gaslighting me, I guess, and just refusing to do the work. And it just kept promising that it was going to give me the work that I wanted it to do. So yeah, that's not necessarily something that I'm particularly looking forward to, is micromanaging my large language models. And finally, I put out this video this week, which is on my Twitter and LinkedIn, in fact, which you can see. It's probably not very easy to see on this kind of live share. It's an awkward way of doing it. A screencast of a Twitter broadcast on Twitter, but this is just showing some of the advanced analysis tools that we have at SearchPilot behind the scenes. So things that our professional services team can use to do deep dive analyses of test results and make them available to our customers. And we've never really shown this before, I don't think. So this is just examples of showing different confidence intervals, detecting and removing outliers, which is a key advanced feature that we're called upon to use quite often when we need to deal with the fact that outside influences can skew our buckets. So if you imagine a product hitting the news or advertising kicking off in an unbalanced way, then the naive interpretation, it just gets thrown off, and it's impossible to run the SEO test in that environment. Whereas we're able to either retrospectively in advance in a human determined way or in an automated classifier way, detect some of those outliers, remove them from the analysis, and understand them in more detail. So if you're interested in that kind of advanced statistical analysis, head on over and watch my demo of what we call the long room, which is our internal tools that our professional services team have access to. I hope you've enjoyed my rambling today across all these different topics. If you want to hear more of me somehow, as I said, I was on Dan Shaw's podcast. He's tweeted the link to that later on this evening. I'm going to be on the SEO video show. And if you're in London, you can come and see me next month at the Exit Tales agency M&A panel. In the meantime, it's been great chatting again. If you want the customer case studies, test results in your inbox, you want to know more about how SEO testing works, or you'd like a demo of SearchPilot, head on over to searchpilot.com/live for all of that. I'll tweet out some of the links and add them to the LinkedIn event that we talked about today. But if you want to join me again next week, I am typically live on a Tuesday afternoon, UK time, Tuesday morning, US time, on the SearchPilot YouTube channel, as well as my Twitter and LinkedIn, where I'm at Will Critchlow. In the meantime, have a great weekend, everyone. See you later.